We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Bava Metzia Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 96b. The Gemara is continuing with the question of Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama asks, when it comes to a husband in regards to the property of his wife, Shoel Have o Socher Have, is he considered to be like a borrower or a renter? Rashi explains, Shoel Have Kasal Kadaitach. Right now we think the question is, Let's say she brought animals into the marriage, which are Nichse Melug. So again, he gets the payros of those animals, but she owns the animals themselves. So is he chayiv in accidents? Shehu osa ben melachto. Again, he's using those for his work. Is he responsible for accidents in that case? Meaning to say, is he considered to be a shoel and responsible for own sin, or he's just a socher? And the Gemara continues. Amar Rava says, Lefum chorfa shaveshta. According to the sharpness of the question, is actually the error over here. There's an error in the question because manavshach. Because either way you look at it, we can answer the question as follows: Ish shoel have, if he's considered to be a borrower, she'ela bebailami, but still he's a borrower, but the owner of the animal, which would be the wife, is providing services to the borrower here. She provides services to her husband, and therefore there's an exemption anyway. And he's sochrav, if he's a renter, also it's the same thing. Schirus bebailami, it's renting, but having services provided by the owner, and so therefore it's exempt either way. So what difference does it make whether he's a shoel or whether he's a socher? Rashi says, she'ela bebailami, that's considered to be borrowing with the services of the owner. Shehi imo tadir b'malachto, she's always working together with her husband. V'hi nishal lo t'chila mishanasa, from the time of the marriage already, she's lending her services, so to speak, to the husband, and so therefore it should be considered ba'ol avimo. You should have that exemption of b'bailim. And so the Gemara says, Ela kikami boile Rami Bar Chama. Rather, what Rami Bar Chama was asking was as follows: the agar mina par. The case is as follows: he rents from her a cow, v'hadar nasba, and then he marries her. So the question is, shoel have o socher have, is he a shoel or a socher in that case? And the Gemara elaborates, shoel have v'yasya she'ela b'bailim mifka sechirus shelo b'bailim. Is he like a borrower at this point in time? Now he's getting it through the marriage, so the borrowing essentially uproots the previous renting, and the borrowing is being done b'bailim with the owner, meaning he's working together with his wife, and that undoes the schira shelo b'bailim, and you have the exemption of ba'ol avimo. O dilmer, maybe sochrav is considered like a renter, or schirus kedekayim akayim, the original schirus is considered to be continuing, and at the time of the rental she wasn't working for him, and therefore you don't have the exemption. But the Gemara continues, Umaishna di shoel havi da'asi she'ela b'bailim mifkas sechira shelo b'bailim. Well, what difference does it make that we say that if he's a shoel, so then the she'ela b'bailim comes and uproots the sechira shelo b'bailim? Isocher nami havi. Even if he's a socher, should it be the same thing? Teisi sechirus b'bailim, teipuk sechira shelo b'bailim. You have now a rental taking place with the owner that supersedes, that takes over for the rental without the owner. So it shouldn't make any difference in this case either if he's considered to be a shoel or a socher. And Rashi explains, my shoel have minisuin ve'elach, is he considered a shoel from the time of the marriage and onward? Because again, he's getting this as nichse melug, umifkas sechirus upater, and then it undoes the schirus, and then you have over here she'ela b'bailim and pater. Or do we say it's considered to be a schirus, meaning the marriage is considered to be a schirus, and then originally the Gemara thinks that therefore it's just the original schirus that's continuing, but the Gemara says that's not true anyway. Even if you're going to say it's a schirus, it should undo the schirus b'bailim, should undo the schirus shelo b'bailim. And so the Gemara instead says, Ela kikami boy Rami Bar Chama. Rather, the question of Rami Bar Chama was as follows: Kagon da'agra ihi parim alma. What happened was she rented a cow from somewhere else, v'hadar nasba, and then she got married. V'aliba d'rabbanan da'amri shoel mishalim l'socher. Now the Gemara clarifies. In this particular case over here, she's essentially a renter, and then through the act of marriage, so the husband gets to use the animal, he's like a borrower. So it's like person A rents the animal, and then that person, he lends out the animal to somebody else. So there was a machlokas tanoim we had earlier, what happens in that situation. So again, the Gemara says, V'aliba d'rabbanan da'amri shoel mishalim l'socher. Now according to the Rabbanan, they say that let's say an accident were to happen to the animal, the shoel would pay the socher, because as far as the shoel is concerned, the socher is lending him the animal. So loti boilach. So there it's not even a question. Devadai she'ela b'bailim, because certainly the husband is borrowing, but at the time he's borrowing, he's also getting the services of the wife, and there's an exemption in that case, meaning the husband is essentially a borrower from the wife who is the lender in that case, and it's exactly the same as a regular she'ela b'bailim case. Kiti boilach, when is it a question? Aliba de Rabbi Yossi. It's only a question according to Rabbi Yossi. The Amar tachzor para l'bailim harishonim, because Rabbi Yossi says that what actually happens in a case where a borrower borrows it from a renter, so he says that it's not that the borrower just pays back the renter, but what actually happens is the borrower gives the cow to the original owner. So according to that, he's not really dealing with his wife anymore. So what would be the halacha? shoel have or socher have. Is he considered to be a shoel? If he's considered to be a shoel, so then in such a situation, you have a case where he's responsible for accidents. Or on the other hand, he could be considered to be a socher, and then he would not be responsible for accidents. And here you do not have a situation of bebailim, because again, according to Rabbi Yossi, he doesn't deal with his wife. He's actually returning the cow to the original owner. And Rashi explains, V'hadar Nasba, again, the case over there is that she rents the cow and then she gets married. So then, now he gets to use the cow. He's either like a lender or a renter at this point in time because he gets to use it as nichse melug. So that was the Gemara's question. My shoel mimen, who is he considered like a shoel? It would be the equivalent of a case where somebody rents a cow and then lends it to somebody else, and then it dies, essentially an onus, an accident. This was a machlokas tanoim earlier in Parak HaMafkid. The Rabbanon say that the socher takes a shvur that it died in a normal death and it's an accident, and the socher is pater. The shoel mishalem l'socher, and the shoel pays the socher. Essentially, the shoel here in this case is the husband, and he has to deal with his wife. He has to return it to his wife. That would be she'ela b'bailam. There would be an exemption. It doesn't matter if it's a she'ela or a schirus. For Rabbi Yossi, Omer tachzer par l'bailam. Rabbi Yossi says no. The cow actually goes back to the original owner, the person who rented it out to the wife, and so therefore you don't have the exemption of bebailim. That's why it makes a difference whether or not the husband is considered a shoel and he would be responsible, or is he a socher and he's not responsible for accidents. And that's what the Gemara clarified. According to the Rabbanon that the shoel deals with the mashil, does not deal with the original owner, so lo tibaylach, that's not a question at all. The afilu hu shoel, even if he is a shoel, kevan delidida boy shalume, since he needs to pay her, so pater, he's totally exempt. The she'ela b'bailami, that's considered borrowing, but the owner is working for you. Kiti boilach, when is it a question l'Rabbi Yossi? It's only a question according to Rabbi Yossi. The Amar tashlumin l'bailam, because Rabbi Yossi says that the payment goes to the original owner. V'hashta lo b'bailam. So now you don't have a case of ba'ol of imo. He's not working with the bailam, because the bailam here, the wife is the one that's working with him, but she's not considered the bailam. So what's the halacha? Shoel havim imena. Is he considered a shoel from her? V'shoel chai ba'onsim, and a shoel would be chayiv an accident, so mashalim lebailim, and then he has to pay the original owner. O socher aver, maybe he's just a renter, or pater mayonsin, he's pater from onsin. O mais chirus. Now, why would you say that a husband, when he uses the property of the wife, why would he be a renter? It certainly seems like he's a borrower. Rashi explains, no, he might be a renter. Sharei tiknu lo chachamim pirkona tachas peiros of nishbis, because the chachamim say she gets something in exchange for the fact that he gets the fruits. What does she get? He has the obligation. He has to redeem her. Let's say she gets captured. So since he has that obligation to redeem her if she gets captured, that's like paying a certain rental fee, and therefore maybe it should be considered a rental. That's the question of Rami Bar Chama. And the Gemara continues and answers. Amar Rava says, Baal lo shoel have v'lo socher have. A husband, in terms of the property of the wife, is not considered a borrower or a renter. Ela lo keach have. Rather, he's considered to be a buyer. Rashi says, Ela lo keach have upater. He's considered to be a buyer, and he is exempt. He is not responsible for accidents. And how do we know that? Mid Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, we know that from Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. Tiyam Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, because Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina said, B'usha hiskinu, in Usha they made the following takana, the following enactment. Ha'isha shemachra b'nichsei melug b'chaye ba'alo. Let's say a woman sells the nichsei melug while her husband is alive, umesa, and then she dies. So now the husband is going to take that property. Habal motzi miyad halakuchos. The husband is allowed to take that property away from the buyers, even though she was really the owner of the property and he only had the produce. He's still allowed to take that property from the lakuchos because he himself is considered to be a buyer, and he's considered to be the first buyer, so he can take it from those subsequent buyers. Rashi says, V'meisa ubal yoresh ishto dvar Torah. The husband inherits his wife, that's a doraisa. Habal motzim yad halakuchos. The husband is allowed to take it away from those buyers. Alma ein lo rishus limchor. You see that she does not have permission to sell the property to whoever lokeach rishon, because he's considered the first buyer of that property. So again, he's not considered a borrower. He's not considered a renter. Rather, he's considered to be a buyer. And the Gemara continues, Boy Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama asks the following question. Baal b'nichsei ishto, again, a husband with regards to the property of his wife, mi moal, who's considered to have committed mi'ila. Rashi says, mi moal, who committed mi'ila, means as follows. Kagon shenaflu la nechasim me'avia mishanisis. Let's say after she got married, she got property from her father. V'imo and mo shel hektish. And some of the stuff she got from her father happened to be money that belonged to hektish. And Rashi says, Ve'in yeduin shein shel hektish. Now it's not known that that money belongs to hektish. V'yomer Rabbanan. Now the Rabbanan say, Baal zocha behen b'chol hanachasim l'shtamesh v'lechol peiros. The husband is able to have some kind of ownership over all these kinds of properties. He can get the produce. Uvetakona zu nasa shliach b'nichse hektish l'knosam. And the Masoras Hashas changes it to shalit. But in any case, it means to say, through this takana, he essentially gets to have ownership, some level of ownership over this property of hektish. Now, right now, the Gemara thinks that automatically is like taking that property out of hektish and bringing it into chulin, because he's essentially making a sort of kinyan on that property. And even if that money is still wrapped up and set aside somewhere, it's bundled up. Who's considered to have committed me'ilah. In other words, the way the Gemara currently understands is that the moment that she gets married, that itself is me'ilah, and the question is, who is the one committing the me'ilah? Is it the wife that's committing the me'ilah, or is it the husband that's committing the me'ilah? That's what the Gemara initially thinks is the question of Rami Bar Chama. Again, Baal b'nechse ishto mimal, who's the one committing the me'ilah? Amar Rava, so Rava says, Man limal, well, what do you mean to say? Who's the one that is committing the me'ilah? Who's the one that you're even suggesting is committing the me'ilah? Limol Baal, you're going to say that the husband is committing me'ilah? He only wants to acquire things that are mutter. He has no interest in acquiring things that are prohibited. So certainly he shouldn't be committing me'ilah. And the same thing with her. Timol Ihi, are you going to say the wife is committing me'ilah by getting married? She doesn't even want the stuff that's permissible to go over to him. She'd rather have full ownership. As Rashi says, the Chacham are forcing in this situation that she loses some of the control over that property and it goes to her husband. So she certainly should not be committing me'ilah. And who else could be committing me'ilah? Nimalu Bezdin, are you going to say that the court is considered to be committing me'ilah? Ki avdu Rabbanan takanta v'yamru Baal lokeach hava. When the Rabbanan made this enactment and said that the husband is a buyer, le'atera, they did that for things that are permissible. Li'isura lo avid Rabbanan takanta. Certainly there was no such enactment by something which is forbidden. Rashi says Nimalu Bezdin shel Yisrael sheba'oso dor. Maybe he'll say that the court, the general court of the Jewish people in that generation, maybe it's their me'ilah, shakol takonos mishpat teluya behen, because all enactments essentially depend on them. V'al yedein nohagos chukim hamusukanim letzibor. It's through them that all of these takonas are enacted. Me'oz v'havik kemoshe tiknu lo heim kinyan zeh. So it's like they said that this kinyan takes place. V'nimsu heim hamaknin lenichse hektish v'otzim lechulin. So you'll say maybe they're the ones that commit the me'ilah, but again, they're not going to make that enactment by something that's prohibited. And so therefore the Gemara says it's really not automatically me'ilah just by them getting married. Elamar Rava, rather what Rava says is as follows: Baal moal l'chishayotzi. The husband commits me'ilah if he actually spends that money. Mididahavi amotzi mos hektish l'chulin. Like anybody who would take money of hektish and use it for mundane uses, that's going to be considered to be me'ilah only at that point in time. It's not automatic. Rashi says, Elamar Rava, ba'odan srurinu munachin lo kanam Baal. While the money is still in bundles and it's just sitting there, it's not being used, so the husband has not acquired them at all. V'lo yatzu l'chulin. It doesn't go out. It doesn't become chulin. It doesn't become me'ilah. Ve'en kan me'ilah, you have no me'ilah yet. Ela l'chashiyotziam l'chulin Baal moal. But if the husband should spend them for mundane matters, so then at that point in time, the husband would commit me'ilah. And the Gemara continues, they had the following question, what if a borrower borrows an animal and then he's using it doing regular work with the animal and it gets weaker? What's the halacha? Is he responsible for that or not? One of the Rabbanan, whose name was Rav Chilkiah, the son of Rav Avia, he said, the fact that you're asking this question, that implies that if the animal would die because of the normal work that it does, that the person would be chayiv. You're only asking if it weakens because of the work is chayiv. That sounds like if the animal dies, so most certainly he's chayiv. But why should he be chayiv for that? He can say, I didn't borrow the animal just to lock it away and not use it at all. Obviously, when a person borrows an animal, he should be allowed to conduct the animal's normal work. Elama Rava, rather Rava says, we don't even need to say that if it weakens because of work, the borrower is exempt. Even if a borrower borrows an animal and it dies in the course of its normal work, nami pater, he is also going to be pater. Because the borrower can say to the lender, I didn't borrow it in order to stow it away, to lock it up somewhere. I borrowed it to use it, and therefore that's legitimate, and the borrower is not responsible for that. And the Gemara continues, how Gavra the Shol Narga Mechavre, there was a person who borrowed an axe from his friend, Itvar, and it broke in the normal use. Asa Lakame de Rav, he came before Rava. Amar Lei said to him, Zil Aisi Sahadi Delav Shanis Bey, go bring witnesses that you didn't do anything strange with it, and it just broke in its normal use, V'iftar, and then you'll be exempt. The Gemara says, V'ileka Sahadi Mai. Now what if he doesn't have witnesses for that? What's the halacha? The Gemara says, Tashma, come in here the following proof. There was a person who borrowed an axe from his friend, and it broke. De Rav, he came before Rav. Amarle said to him, Zil Shalom Le Nargam Ali. You have to pay him a full axe. The Gemara continues, Amarle Rav Kahana Ravasi Rav. Rav Kahana and Ravasi, they said to Rav, Rashi says, V'itvar, it broke b'pshia, broke in a situation where it broke through negligence, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Zayin Amud Aleph.